Hello everyone, I'm Jeanna and I am a library specialist at the Archer Branch Library. I'm going to show you a few basic shapes involved with quilling. Now quilling is a popular craft and it consists of rolling up strips of paper into coils and then manipulating the coils to turn them into designs. So let me just give you an example. This picture here was all done with a toothpick, believe it or not, a toothpick. The butterfly was done with a Q-tip. So you don't have to invest any money. You can just grab a couple of things that you probably already have in the house. Of course, you have the option to buy a quilling tool at a art store, but you don't have to do that. Maybe you're just gonna try it out and see how you like it, and then if you really like it, you can proceed to buy a quilling kit. They are fairly inexpensive, but for right now, I'm going to show you how to get started with a home tool. Now, the trickiest part about this tutorial is the toothpick. You want to cut it in half, right down the middle. Make a slit right down the middle. So in order to do that, I actually put the toothpick in this tool, clipped off the pointy part, and then cut it right down the middle. And you want to just cut it deep enough to where you can fit a thin slice of paper inside. It may take you several tries, so I advise just going ahead and buying a toothpick box. Or you can also use a Q-tip with a plastic stick. I just took it and, like the toothpick, I slid it right down the middle to make like a fork so I can slip the paper in between that slot. Here was another pattern that I did with quilling coils, and this was all done with a toothpick as well. So you will get a higher quality product if you use the professional quilling tool, but as you can see, a toothpick can do just fine. Now this I put on a tile. You can buy blank tiles like this if you want to, or you can put it on a little canvas. This was a large canvas here, but look around the house and see what kind of a foundation you can put it on. I know some people can even grab a bottle, take off the labels, or a vase, make it plain, and actually attach the coils onto these items. So just use your creativity. So let's begin with just a basic coil. I'm going to take my toothpick with the fork in it, and I have cut some strips of paper. Now you don't need to be exact, no worries. I mean, just kind of eyeball it. You don't have to be precise, but you do want to kind of make it a consistent size. So I just took an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and I measure mine, well, I don't measure it, but I approximate about 1/2 millimeter if you want to be exact about it. And I cut this strip of paper. As long as you're consistent, you'll be okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to take my strip of paper and I'm going to thread it. I'm threading it as you can see into the toothpick. Okay, and now I'm just going to start rolling it. And while you're rolling it, you just want to be sure that you line it up with each twirl. Don't get off track. You want to keep it one layer on top of the other the whole time you're rolling it. So I'm rolling, and again, if I start getting off track here, if my coil starts rolling to the side, I want to correct it immediately, because you don't want to get off track. You want to keep it consistent. Okay, so now I have a good coil on my toothpick. It's a little tricky sometimes taking it off the toothpick because the toothpick's a little rough. So you want to make sure that you pull it. Well, I'm going to show you how not to do it, because my first couple of turns I rolled it a little bit too tightly. We want it to be tight, but the first couple of rolls you don't want it to be too tight, otherwise you're going to have trouble getting the paper off of the toothpick. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, so this is what happens when your paper gets hooked on the toothpick. You have what's called a tornado. So you don't want that. So if you cannot, okay, now I got it. Sometimes you just have to quickly jerk it, but keep it straight. Now, fortunately, I was able to save this even though it started getting off track. So this right here is a tight coil. A tight coil. And there's no space in between. So after you get your coil taken off the toothpick, what you want to do is take some glue and put just a tiny bit of glue right there at the end. If you put too much glue, it's going to mess up. So you just want a teeny tiny bit of glue. Okay, so here's my first coil. This is a tight coil. There's no space in between, like I say. Very small, very tight. This is the type of coil I used for my pattern. If you see the yellow coils here, those were very small, tight coils that I used. Let's try one with a Q-tip. Okay, so again, I'm going to insert the paper into my Q-tip, begin to roll, keeping it aligned the whole time. If it starts moving over, correct it immediately, because you want a nice shaped coil. Okay, so I've rolled the paper. It's time to pull out. The Q-tip, I think, is actually easier to pull out of the paper, but if you do the toothpick carefully, you'll be okay with that too. Alright, so now I have another coil, and this time I'm going to loosen it up a little bit. I'm just going to let it unwind a little bit, kind of manipulating the center. See, it's getting looser, looser. And if you just set it down on a table, it's going to spin out a little bit too, if you want to do it that way. But I no longer have a tight coil, I have a loose coil. And if you want to make it looser, you can. What you can do, if you want to make it bigger and looser, you can get a water cap. If you take a round object like this water bottle cap and you want a bigger coil, you can put the coil inside the cap, spread the coil out, making it bigger. And another tool that I've been using a lot, this is so handy. Such simple tools, but they do such a good job. Oftentimes you'll hear that a tweezers is necessary for quilling, and it helps a lot, believe me. But I didn't have a tweezers, so I took a paper clip and I simply made a pointy end of the paper clip, and this helps in placing the coils where I want it to go on the paper. But it also helps to spread out the coil if you want a bigger coil. So depending on how big you want your coil, how loose you want your coil, you can use things as simple as a bottle cap to kind of shape it. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have my loose coil, again, I'm going to glue the very bottom just a tiny bit. So now I have a loose coil. Now, once you can practice a coil and get it pretty consistently, each one's going to be a little different, but you try to get it as consistent as possible. So your center's going to be pretty much the same on each coil. And once you've got the coil down with a little practice, you can start to manipulate the coils and put them into different shapes. So let me go back to this pattern, and you'll see in the pink what looks like hearts. And I'll show you how I did that. I took a loose coil and I just started manipulating it with my fingers. And all I did was just squeeze it at one end to move that circle part the other way. So I squeeze, squeeze. It's really amazing how you can manipulate these coils into the shapes that you want. Okay, so now I've got a different shape. Instead of being a coil, this is called a teardrop. So I took a teardrop, and let's do another teardrop and I can show you. A heart can be made very easily with two teardrops, and all you do is put them together. All right, let's roll another coil and I'll show you a heart. I'm gonna use the toothpick again. Okay, so again, you're gonna thread the paper in to the toothpick. The first couple spins, let them be a little loose because you don't want to have trouble getting it off the toothpick, okay? But once you've done your first couple of spins, then you can start rolling more tightly. I got my nice coil. Okay, so I'm going to pull it out. If it snags, you're going to get a little bit of a problem like that. Your middle will not look clean and crisp. It'll be a little different. Not that that's bad. Sometimes you can take a toothpick or another kind of sharp object and fix it. See, that's better. But it's still not going to look exactly like the other coils once that happens. Okay, so now I've got my tight coil, and I'm going to loosen it up. Okay, looking pretty good. I like that. Okay, that's a nice loose coil. Now again, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue at the end. And close it up. Give it just a couple seconds to dry. Okay, now with my loose coil, again, I'm going to manipulate it. I'm going to squeeze one end. I'm going to let that center part move over. So I'm going to squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it. And I find if you squeeze the other end too a little bit, you'll get a nice pattern for a teardrop. You'll get those nice lines in there. All right, so now we've got another teardrop. The one teardrop's a little bigger than the yellow one, but if you want to make a heart, okay, you're going to put the two teardrops together to make a heart. Okay, and of course it's better if you have it the same color, but this is just an example. So you're going to glue those two teardrops together to make a heart. Okay, so you already know how to get going now. You can make greeting cards with these patterns. If you take your cardstock, or it could be construction paper, fold it in half, you can apply a pattern to the paper. You can put it in a shadow box, or like I say, you could put it on bottles. But just let your imagination go wild. You know the tight coil, you know the loose coil, and you know the teardrop. And there are other shapes if you'd like to pursue learning more about quilling. But to get you going as a beginner, that's really all you need to know. And you can find patterns online or in books, or you can create your own design. This pattern here was just one I started working on. It just, I kind of went with the flow, you know, I didn't have a specific design in mind. Once you get going with these coils, you know, ideas start setting in. I hope you've enjoyed my little tutorial, and you have fun doing quilling, because it's a great relaxing hobby, and you just never know what you're going to create.